And we are live in another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavon, joined alongside once again by my co-host Andrew Johnson, as we are now through 8 weeks of this year's 2024 college football season, and a lot has been shaken up once again in the top 25 polls. Two big matchups in the SEC have now led us to a different top 25 this week, including a new number one team in the country as of this past Saturday. And we now head into week number 9, still trying to figure out, Johnson, who really are, I think we have a good understanding of maybe some of the best teams in college football, but we're still trying to figure out exactly who might be that most dominant team that we think at the end of the day, you know what? Yeah, that's the team that's going to win the national championship at the end of this season. I think we're still wondering that going into this week number 9 coming up.
Yeah, we have an idea. I still think we actually have no idea. I think we literally have no
don't
idea.
Have an idea. Never mind. I retract my statement.
Yeah, I think we have no idea. Oregon, you could argue Oregon right now because they're undisputed the best team right now on paper. They're undisputed the best team.
I guess, but I don't know.
Am I going to take spoiler? Am I going to take them against Texas? Am I going to take them against Georgia?
No.
No, probably not. I'm probably not. Maybe that's just the SEC bias, but probably not. But for now, they're number one. Spoiler.
But yeah, it's just been one crazy ride we've had this college football season, and we had some big games.
The ride gets crazier.
Yeah, the ride never stops. If you ask Russell Wilson, never stops. That's to say the least. But we'll talk about Russell Wilson and company tomorrow on the show when we recap the NFL week once Monday Night Football ends tonight. As of this recording, there are 2 games in the National Football League tonight. But let's go dive into what happened in week number 8 in college football. And let's dive into one of the 2 big SEC games that happened this past weekend. They call it the third Saturday in October, Johnson, between these 2 teams in the rivalry game, as number 7 Alabama went into Knoxville to take on number 11 Tennessee. A very offensive struggle in this first half between these 2 teams. Alabama would get the lone points of the first half, going into halftime with a 7-0 lead against the Volunteers. We saw Tennessee have a quarterback change due to an injury. Nico, I always keep forgetting how to say it. Iamaleava. I probably butchered
that so badly. Better job than I can do.
I probably butchered that absolutely horrendously. He got injured in the first half, did come back eventually in that first half, but it was late in the first half. Dylan Sampson had some big runs in the second half, especially in the third quarter. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, gave Tennessee a 14-10 lead going into the fourth quarter. Bama would take the lead at the beginning of the fourth quarter on a Justice Haynes rushing touchdown. We saw Tennessee respond about 8 minutes later as Chris Brazel II got a receiving touchdown, giving Tennessee a 21-17 lead. They would get a field goal with 1:30 left to take a 24-17 lead. Their defense does the work as well in the later stages as they force Jalen Milroe to make one of the many mistakes, unfortunately, he had in this game against the Volunteers. And Tennessee gets the big win, Johnson. They now go to 6-1 on the season. They knock off Alabama 24-17 in the final. And kind of crazy to think, Johnson, it's probably the first time in a long time that we've seen Alabama in the regular season, at least at this point in the season as well. We're pretty much past the halfway point, that they now have 2 losses in the regular season, and they have fallen a pretty good amount in the top 25 polls as well. They're pretty much in must-win now territory for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it was crazy because I kind of saw this happening from last year. The landscape of college football was changing. I said this numerous times that teams that kind of came out of nowhere over the last 10, 15 years or so, such as in Alabama, really, they rose to prominence starting the late 2000s, early 2010s. And I said that legacy schools that had those dormant donors were going to start coming and rising either up again or they're going to come out of nowhere. And that's where you see Texas A&M now being one of the premier schools. You see, spoiler alert, Indiana being a premier school. And then you see the newer blood schools, like in Alabama, that even though they've enjoyed success for the last 15 years, they don't have that historic success, if you know what I mean.
They saw some national championships, but yeah.
Of course it is. Listen, no one's going to deny their run over the last for about 15 years or so. But what you can't deny is schools with old money. And a lot of schools that have old money,
yeah,
it's inevitable. That's just, it is what it is.
I think the only good thing for Bama at this point is that their season's not done yet. But a third loss in the regular season, I don't. I think that pretty much takes you out of any hopes to make the college football playoff. And they have some tough games the next 2 weeks. The next two games, I should say. You're playing Missouri this upcoming weekend, and which who knows what the status is of Brady Cook in that game, the Missouri starting quarterback. He did get injured in Missouri's last game, and then you go to LSU to take on the Tigers, who have been red hot of late, and they have a big game upcoming as well on Saturday. We'll talk about that game later on in the mushing hour, but other than that, I mean, they have three winnable games against Mercer, Oklahoma, because the way Sooners have been this season has been bad, and then against Auburn to end the year. So the next 2 weeks are going to really determine if Alabama is still alive for the college football playoff. And then, even if they are to win those games to finish out the regular season 10-2, you got to wonder, will that still be enough? It might be, but they still will need some help along the way to make sure that that is the case.
Yeah, Alabama can definitely make the college football playoffs. It is wild that we're trying to figure out their pathway right now, halfway through the season. I thought there would never come a day I'd be looking for that, but
Right.
here we are right now.
And now for Tennessee, I mean, the door's wide open for them to make it. They play Kentucky in their next game, so they have a little bit of time off between that. They still have to go to Georgia, which is going to be a really tough game. And they have to play at Vanderbilt, which is crazy enough to think that that is right now one of the toughest games left on their schedule, but that isn't
Oh,
the
it's a
case.
premier. Yeah. Spoiler alert: we live in a universe where Vanderbilt, Navy, Army.
SMU,
Let's see. SMU, Mizzou,
Indiana,
Pittsburgh, Indiana, BYU,
Iowa State.
Clemson. Actually, Clemson's not too wild. Iowa State, and let's say Kansas State. But you know what? Really, all these teams are ranked above Michigan,
The defending national champion, yeah.
which is this is a wild statement because these teams, as we kept on listing them, kept historically football wise, kept on getting worse and worse. So
Yeah.
this is the NCAA landscape 2 years into NIL, which is crazy. I think we could see 5 SEC teams in the playoffs this year. I really do think we can.
It might be possible. I mean, Texas is in that category, Georgia, A&M and LSU right now are in that conversation. Tennessee is obviously in that conversation, and Bama is still in that conversation as well. And
Yeah,
hell,
that's 6 of them right there.
if Missouri beats Bama, then Missouri just takes over Bama's spot in that conversation. So that's really the case right now that we're currently
We
going
live in a world where we might have 6 SEC teams in a 12-team playoff bracket, but none of them are the number one seed.
Right. But yeah, a very tough loss for Bama because now they drop pretty much in a big amount of spots in the AP Top 25 polls, and they really need to get their stuff going the next couple of weeks. Earlier on in the season, the defense was the problem for this team. Now, the last 2 weeks, it's been their offense. They really have not been just consistent enough to win these games, and this is a game that they probably could have won easily the way Tennessee struggled early on in this one, but they were not able to stop Dylan Sampson, who had a monster game for Tennessee to give them the victory and now put them the 6-1 on the season. But as I mentioned, Jonathan, that was not the only big game that we had this past weekend in the SEC. We had that huge matchup in Austin between number 5 Georgia and number 1 Texas. Texas, one of the lone remaining undefeated teams in college football this season, especially in the Premier Conference in the SEC. And they had to take on the top dog, no pun intended, of the SEC the last couple of seasons in Georgia. And Georgia really made a statement earlier on in this game. It was 23-0 Georgia going into halftime. Texas even made a quarterback change. They benched Quinn Ewers at one point in that first half for Arch Manning. It did not work even if with Arch Manning in the game. They still were struggling offensively. They brought Quinn Ewers back into the game in the second half. He got them in the end zone for the first time in the game, making it 23-8. And then pick would set up Texas then for another touchdown. They would make it an 8-point game in the third quarter. So they come back from a 23-0 deficit to make it a 8-point deficit going into the fourth quarter. But their offense just could not get anything going in the fourth quarter. 2 turnover on downs on fourth downs in the fourth quarter. Trevor Etienne had a rushing touchdown to begin the fourth quarter. And Georgia was able to hold on and get a very convincing win in this game over the Longhorns, 30-15 the final. Georgia, people were kind of riding them off after what happened against Bama earlier on in the season. Everyone thought that Texas was the new premier team in the SEC. And Georgia, you know, they made a statement in this game saying, "Hey, listen, we're still that top team in this entire conference. It should not be this newcomer that just joined us this season. We're still that team to beat in the SEC." And now they go into week number 9. Now it's with still a one-loss team. Texas now dropped for the first time this season. They now go to 6-1, and Texas has another tough game coming potentially on Saturday against a very scrappy Vanderbilt team that's been really good as of late.
Yeah, I said that Georgia was easily going to cover this game. I didn't think they were easily going to win this game. Those are two different statements, and
Right.
I am shocked that. Listen, one-off games happen, and now with the new 12-team format, you're allowed to have a one-off game. But
Yeah,
just in the fashion that it happened, it's
because we don't know
shocking.
how exactly how um everything's going to turn out to be, because we don't know what it takes for you to make a 12 team format. This is the first time we've had this iteration of it, so it's like, oh, if I lose 2 games, I can still make it. If I lose 2 games, I might not make it. No one really knows what it takes to really get there. Obviously, if you're
I
undefeated or
think
if
it's
you
going
have
to be
one
based
loss,
off of strength
you're
of
fine.
schedule. That's
It
that's my guess.
That probably plays a factor too. And obviously wins against certain teams, like we mentioned, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, wins against certain teams, like how it is in college basketball for March Madness, that's probably going to play a factor as well. Because a team like Notre Dame, who really doesn't have a big signature win other than the Texas A&M game in week 1, has has still 2 big games left this season against current top 25 teams that we'll talk about in a little bit when we do a top 25 breakdown that you already had mentioned just a few minutes ago. But yeah, it's kind of where we're at right now when it comes down to this format and what it might entail and what it will take to get into the college football playoff this season. Um,
I think only time will really be able to tell something like that.
I will say, if we go based off of what the AP poll is right now, Johnson, this would be the current playoff format for this season. It would be Oregon's the 1, Georgia would be the 2, Miami would be the 3. Because remember, the top 4 seeds are all based off of conference
Yep, yep.
championships. And then the 4 seed would be Iowa State, which is crazy to think that that would be the case.
Would it be? Oh, ACC's not getting one. No,
The
ACC
Ace,
is
Miami,
Miami. I'm
Miami,
sorry. I'm
right?
sorry.
So then you have Penn State would be the 5 seed playing 12 seeded Boise State, because Boise State is right now the highest ranked group of 5 team remaining in college football. Then it would be the 9-8 matchup between LSU and Tennessee. The 11-6 matchup would be BYU and Ohio State, and then the 10-7 match would be Clemson and Texas. So that right now would mean, if we were basing this off of the AP poll, the way the rest of the regular season goes, that means that Notre Dame and Indiana right now are the first 2 teams out of the college football playoff if the season ended today.
Yeah, first 5 out would be Notre Dame, Indiana, A&M, Alabama, Kansas State. Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So
That'd be brutal to
listen,
miss out on.
there's still a lot of time. It might be week 9 now, but some of these teams still have to play 5 games remaining in this season. So there still is a really good chance of the entire landscape of this season changing on a whim of a dime. And it's very well could happen potentially this upcoming weekend, because there are some huge matchups we have upcoming this week in week number 9. But before we break down what the games we're going to have in week 9, let's just look at what we have now entailing for this upcoming week with the top 25 polls. Now, I kind of somewhat broke it down a little bit with the way the college football playoff is going based off the poll. Oregon is now the new number 1 team in the country after Texas lost. Georgia's now number 2 after they beat Texas. Texas did drop down to 5, so they took over where Georgia just was originally. Tennessee moved up back into the top 10 at number 7 after they went over Alabama. We saw Indiana, their dominant win over Nebraska. They now move in to number 13. They would be one of the first teams out if the season ended today. Alabama dropping 8 spots in the polls. They're now number 15, so they really will have to do some work in the next couple of weeks if they want to have a chance to make the CFP. We also saw some movement with Illinois after they went over Michigan. We saw uh, now Navy moving up a spot, Army remaining in the top 25 polls as well. And lo and behold, Johnson, as you mentioned, Vanderbilt is now ranked for the first time in what seems to be a very long time. I couldn't tell you the last time they were ranked. But right now, the last 4 teams ranked in the AP poll are SMU, Army, Navy, and Vanderbilt. And you had mentioned it. If you had told this to you either at the beginning of this season or at the beginning of last season that they were all ranked ahead of
You would be
Michigan,
institutionalized.
you'd be entered into a rehab, for to say the least.
I wouldn't say
Uh,
rehab, but you'd be
uh,
checked in to have your mental facilities checked.
you might need
You'd be
rehab still for it.
you would be really you would be evaluated. That's what would happen here.
But yeah, that is our top 25 polls pretty much going into week number 9. Is there anything that really stood out to you, Johnson, or did you kind of expect this after what happened in week 8?
Yeah, this looks like an NCAA college poll in college football
And college football
25.
25. Yeah,
After
that's
eight,
true.
after you've simmed for 8 years and nothing makes sense, this is what
That's
this
true.
feels like.
Yeah, and like I said, and keep in mind, this week there are some big matchups for some teams that are currently unranked that are playing ranked teams. Syracuse is playing Pittsburgh, UNLV is playing Boise State, Duke is playing SMU. Crazy to think that Duke and SMU right now is a potential watchable game this upcoming weekend. Um, you have Nebraska playing Ohio State. I wouldn't really look too much into that considering how Nebraska got destroyed by Indiana, but yeah, those are some of the games that we don't have on our mushing. Some of the games that we don't have on our mushing hour, but there's still some games to watch going in to week number 9 because they could lead to some potential upsets. And even Indiana, they're going to be hosting College Game Day this week. They take it on Washington upcoming this weekend. That's a potential upset watch maybe for the Hoosiers after their big blowout win over the Cornhuskers. So if there's nothing else, Johnson, I think it is time to go into our week number 9 mushing hour for this college football season. And oh man, another big slate for us going into week 9. 8 games to be exact going into week 9. Now, if we look at what happened last week, Johnson, over 500. We'll take that. You went 4-2. You're slowly but surely improving your record after a really bad start to the season. I'm still just a little bit under 500, but with a good week this week, I can potentially get over 500 for the first time, maybe all season. I don't know if I was at one point over 500 for the college football season. So I will get us started with one of the first games that will be happening this week, and this will be happening on Thursday. And honestly, Johnson, with the potential maybe bad Thursday night game, it's not really a great game in the NFL this upcoming Thursday, which we'll break down tomorrow. I probably will watch this game, even though it's one of my team, even though it's my favorite college football team. I'll probably be watching this game on Thursday night because it's a big matchup in the ACC as Syracuse goes on the road to number 19 Pitt, who is currently undefeated at 6-0. The Panthers are a 6-point favorite in this game. The over/under is set at 61.5. Who do you got for this one?
You're gonna hate me, but give me Pitt -6 here. I think
I
this
am
is the easy one.
I'm
They're at
perfectly content
home.
with that. I'm perfectly content with that. You know me. If you took Syracuse +6, I'd be really scared because of the potential mush. Um, I'm gonna go. It's probably a bias. Like I said that on our MLB pod with the Yankees. Probably another bias pick here, but I'm gonna go with Syracuse +6 in this game. I think they have a good chance to win. Um, it still stings that their only losses to Stanford, who's been really bad this season, but they could probably catch Pitt off guard in this game. Pitt's had some close encounters the last couple of weeks. I think we could keep, I'm saying we, but I think Syracuse could keep this game close. I don't know if they get the job done and win the game outright, but if they were able to get it done outright, they would be ranked going into week number 10. So for my sake at least, I'm hoping that maybe they can get the job done on Thursday and they come out on top with the victory. But we'll have to see what happens in that one. But Johnson, how about a big game on Friday night that we have in the Mountain West of all conferences?
Oh, that's right. We have number 17, Boise State, the Broncos. Blue Turf is going on the road into the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the Running Rebels. They're
The
at home.
stadium.
Despite that, uh, Boise State is a 2.5 point favorite. 65.5 is the slated over under. Give me UNLV +2.5 here. I think that's easy. You get some home cooking here. I think that's the obvious choice.
You know what's also an obvious choice? I'm not going to pick who wins the game. I have the over in this game. I think it's probably. I would be stunned. I know it's 65.5. I would not be stunned if the over hits in the first half of this game. These are two of the more prolific offenses we have in the entire nation. Unfortunately, their defense is not really that great because of how how they've been playing this season, but their offenses have been unbelievable. Ashton Genty is the Heisman favorite right now. He's probably gonna have to have a monster game if Boise State wants to get the job done. I think he comes out on top with a huge game. If I had to pick between the two, I probably lean towards Boise, but I do have the over. I think we get over 66, and we might get it in the entire first half between these two teams in the Mountain West. Now, how about this game on Saturday, Johnson? In MetLife Stadium, a neutral site game, and it's a game that we probably did not expect to have marked on our calendars at the beginning of the season, especially being two top 25 teams. As number 12 Notre Dame will take on number 24 Navy. Notre Dame goes into this game as a 12.5 point favorite with the over-under set at 52.5. What do you got for this one?
Give me Navy plus 12.5. Notre Dame always underperforms in big games, and this will be no difference. I think Notre Dame will win this game, but they're going to scare their fans a little bit over here in MetLife Stadium. Give me Navy plus 12.5.
I I really don't want to mush Navy because I want them. I want them to win. I
Listen, plus
really,
12.5
really.
isn't a mush here because they could
I
just win the
mean,
game outright.
they could. All right, I'll go. I'm gonna ride with you. I'm gonna go with Navy plus 12.5 as well. I think this is absolutely like you mentioned. This could be a potential letdown spot for Notre Dame. It's by far Navy's toughest test of the season. They're gonna really need to show out for this game. But I think they keep it close. I don't know what it is. I think they just keep it close. They're going to need that running attack to get them involved and keep this a back and forth game. If they win the game in terms of time possession, then they will keep this one close and they'll have a chance to maybe pull off what a lot of people would consider to be an upset. So give me Navy plus 12.5 as well. What's our next game coming from the Big Ten Conference now?
We have the number 20 Illinois Fighting Illini going into Eugene to take on the Oregon Ducks, number one team in the country. Oregon is a 25-point favorite at home, and the over/under slate at 54.5. Just give me the over here. Just give me the over. I'm not going to bother taking minus 25 or plus 25. I'll take the over. That's the
That is a
safest bet.
that is a very bad line, because I mean they're just giving no respect to Illinois in this game, but I think it's tough because do you trust Illinois to be that team? I mean they had a close encounter with Purdue, beating them by one, and then Oregon just beat Purdue this past week by 35 points. So I'll go with you again as well. I'm going to go with the over as well. I don't really like the line. I don't want to touch minus 25. It's just too much for my blood. So I will just go with the over between these two Big Ten schools. Now, shifting our attention back into the SEC, I would say this is probably an eliminator game, Johnson, between these two teams. A third loss would pretty much eliminate any hope, or at least for one team. A third loss for Bama would pretty much eliminate their hopes. Missouri with the second loss would eliminate their hopes as well. As Missouri goes on the road into Tuscaloosa to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Missouri number 21 in the country, Alabama number 15 in the country. The Tide go into this game as a 13.5 point favorite, over under set at 56.5. There is injury concerns in this game, Johnson, for Brady Cook, the starting quarterback for Missouri. We'll see if he plays. Does that play a factor for you in this pick?
Give me Alabama minus 13.5 here. They're going to really recover from last week, and they're going to take their pain and suffering out on Mizzou, who has underperformed in big games this year by a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with another mush. I gotta go Bama minus 13.5 as well. I think even if Brady Cook plays, I think the desperation that Bama has right now is gonna be beyond belief going into this game. They cannot afford another loss. They need to come out on top with the victory. They even a close encounter will not be good for Alabama in this game. But we've seen what happened. We saw what happened in Missouri a couple weeks ago. Remember when they went to A&M, tough road environment, and they got absolutely dominated in that game. This is another tough road environment, one of the toughest in all the nation. I don't see them having a very good encounter with the Alabama Crimson Tide in this one. So give me the Tide to roll minus 13.5. Probably means if you are better that you should probably take Missouri plus 13.5 for that game, considering it is the mushing hour. What is our other big game that we have this week, Johnson? Like another big game in the SEC.
We have the number 5 Texas Longhorns going on the road, take on number 25 Vanderbilt at home. Despite this, the Texas is an 18-point favorite on the road. 18.5 point, excuse me, over under slated at 53.5. Copy paste script from Alabama to Texas. Texas is going to look for revenge on the road, and Vandy, it's been fun, but they're about to lose to 20 plus points to Texas. So
Yeah.
it was fun, guys.
Well, maybe not, Johnson, because I'm also going with Texas minus 18.5. This is, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but this has been a lot of copy and pasting between our picks so far in this week. But I think after that loss to Georgia, I think a lot of people are now clowning Texas and saying that, oh, you guys are fake. You're probably not really that dominant in the SEC. They're going to want to put up a showing in this game against Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's running a wave of momentum right now, but it probably comes to a screeching halt in this game against Texas. It might not be a pretty one between these two teams. So I have the Longhorns as well, minus 18.5. That means take Vanderbilt plus 18.5, folks. I'm just going to tell you that off the side. Our next game now shifts us over into the Big Ten as number 3 Penn State goes on the road to Madison to take on Wisconsin. Potential trap game for the Nittany Lions in this one, Johnson. They are a 6.5-point favorite on the road with the over/under set at 47.5.
Man, I love how you mentioned the trap game because that's what it is for Wisconsin. Wisconsin's going to cover here plus 6.5. Penn State has everything going for them. They have potential to be the number one team in the nation coming in the next coming weeks, and they're going to blow it here in Wisconsin because there's always teams that happen. So it's going to be Wisconsin plus 6.5.
You know what the biggest concern for this game also is, Johnson? Look who
Please tell
Penn
me.
State. Look who Penn State plays next week. I'll wait.
Who would that be? I
They
want me to
play.
take a look at it.
Unless you want to take a look for it, I have it right here. I can tell you who it is.
I think I heard you say Ohio State.
It's Ohio State at home. That
That's a
is
trap
legit
game.
next week. So they really might be looking forward to that game next week against the Buckeyes. And that's a game at Happy Valley too.
As
So
a trap game of all trap games.
this is a really big trap spot for Penn State. We saw what happened against USC a couple weeks ago. I mentioned that could be a trap game, and it really was a trap game, but they were able to hold on at the very end. However, Johnson, I don't know what's leaning me towards Penn State in this game. I'm just not really a big fan of Wisconsin this season, compared to how I was at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go with Penn State minus 5.5 in this one. I don't know, not really a big difference between the 6.5 and the 5.5, but I will just go with Penn State. I think they still win this game no matter what. I do think it's going to be closer than people expected. Maybe a touchdown. I think a touchdown is certainly the case. But I think Penn State gets the job done. The defense has been incredible this season, and hopefully for their sake, they don't overlook their matchup next week with Ohio State. I think they get the job done in this matchup with the Badgers on Saturday night. But one more big game in the SEC this week, Johnson. Why don't you tell us what that big game is to end our mushing hour this week?
But how big is this game, Nick? You gotta tell me.
It is
Would you say?
huge,
I mean, this could be one of the biggest games of the year so far. And let me.
especially for one of these teams. It's a huge game for them.
I think for both these teams, it's equally big. But let me go into it. It is the
I'll
number
tell you
eight.
why. Yeah, go ahead.
The number 8 LSU Tigers on the road going into Texas Station. To take on the number 14 Texas A&M Aggies. Go Aggies! Aggies at home, 2.5-point favorites. 53.5 is the slated over under. Before I give my pick, please give your reasoning.
So I think if A&M loses this game, right, it would be their second loss on the season. And if you look at the remaining schedule that they have this year after this LSU game, the next biggest game they have left is just Texas. So that's where I'm concerned about this game for them. If they lose this game, I don't know where they would drop in the polls. I don't think they would drop into the 20s. I think they would drop maybe like to 18 or 19 maybe. But a loss would mean that you have to beat Texas. If they win this game, then they don't necessarily have to beat Texas the final week to make the college football playoff.
Yeah, they get a mulligan. You're right.
So that's why I think it's more of a big game for Texas A&M in this spot. For LSU, don't get me wrong, it's a big game for them. They need to win it also, but they still have to play Alabama, right? So they still have a big game in that one. And then they still have to play Vanderbilt, who, if they keep the momentum going, that's still a big win for LSU. I think no matter what, because of where the rankings are for these two teams, I think that's why it's more of a big game for A&M compared to LSU. So that's why I made that comment before we broke down what the lines were for this game. But nonetheless, Johnson, what is your pick for this game?
Aggies minus 2.5. They need to win this game to really stay alive in the college football playoffs. I know you just kind of gave the whole spiel that they don't need it. I think for mental clarity purposes, they need this game. So give me the Aggies here.
I was just reading a report because apparently there was a rumor that Quinn Ewers said that he was going to stop playing this season. Is that what I'm saying?
I doubt it.
There was there was
but
apparently a rumor that Quinn Ewers was saying that he was going to leave Texas now to go to just get ready for the NFL draft, but they're saying the report is false. I just wanted to make sure because if it was any breaking news, I wanted to make sure before we wrapped up our
Especially,
show.
yeah,
Yeah, because
of course.
we always seem to get the news after we wrap up our shows. Thankfully, that didn't happen in the NFL last week when those trades happened, but that's most of the time what does happen here on the show. When some breaking news happens, it happens the day after we are done recording. So just wanted to make sure I read that headline correctly. Now, going back into this game, I already gave my reasoning as to how big of a game this is for both of these teams. I feel like this is more of a big game for A&M just because of where they're currently seated in the top 25 polls. But if you look at how these two teams have been playing the last couple of weeks, A&M has really looked like a different team ever since that debacle in week 1 against Notre Dame. LSU's had some close encounters the last couple of weeks. The game against South Carolina, that overtime win over Ole Miss. They've been better, which is good. The defense has looked a lot better as well, which is also very good because they really struggled to start the year as well. However, despite the defenses doing that, I do think so. This could be maybe a high-scoring game. I think I'll just stay away from the over just because I got burned by LSU's last game against Ole Miss. I thought that was going to be an over, and it was not. I will go with LSU plus 4.5 in this game. I think my reasoning also is I could see LSU winning on the road outright. I'm a little bit concerned that my reasoning for A&M is why they might come out, they might be all in, all out for this game. It's probably, backs against the wall. You're fighting for your life at this rate. I think A&M's going to come out like how they did against Missouri, maybe potentially, and really try and make an opening statement. I think you'll get a great back and forth game, especially on prime time between these two teams. Another big matchup in the SEC. I'll go with LSU plus 4.5 just in case if they were to lose, it's not by more than if it's by a field goal, I'll take the loss. I really could care less. So give me LSU plus 4.5 to round out week number 9's mushing hour. Another great slate for college football coming up this upcoming weekend with a lot of stuff going on, Johnson. We know the World Series is happening this weekend. We know that the NBA season's starting tomorrow. We still have more NFL football coming this weekend. So, and of course, college basketball starts next week as well. So, lot to intake for us the next couple of weeks, but we're definitely happy to be covering all of it and the best time of the sports calendar year. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Go Aggies. That's all I have to say. Looking forward to another great week of college football. And 1 week closer to the championship. We're already almost in November already. So we really only have 4 or 5 weeks of this left. So cherish it while you have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're about to go into week 9. As you mentioned, a couple more weeks left. Some of these teams have just a couple games left. And then we get into the best time of the year, Johnson. Conference Championship Week always is fun. Especially with a lot on the line, making that 12-team format, because some of those teams that are not in the conference championship week are going to be sweating out that entire weekend to see if they make the playoff or not. So these next few weeks are going to be really fun, must-watch television to see who makes that CFP, that new 12-team format for the first time in college football history. So we'll see how big these games are coming this weekend will entail what this season might embark on at the end of the regular season. But that's going to do us for this week here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Week number 8 in the books. We now head into week number 9, and we have some huge games upcoming this weekend in college football. Missouri and Alabama. We have Notre Dame and Navy. Surprisingly, can't believe I'm saying that game's a big game. LSU and Texas A&M, by far the game of the week. Also, some other big games between Illinois and Oregon. Penn State goes on the road to Wisconsin. And, of course, we have some big games going into the weekend with Syracuse and Pitt, Boise State and UNLV. Should be some fun ones. We'll see how it all unfolds going into week number 10. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your weekend.